Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the first of our virtual coffee breaks, intended for everyone to share experiences about how to cope in these unprecedented times. My name is Robert Baldock, and I'm the Managing Director of Clustre, the innovation brokers. We put people together so they can innovate together. And who can argue about the need to innovate right now? And some of us were just chatting about medical innovations, and it's fantastic to see, for example, how Dyson went from current situation to a new design for a ventilator in 10 days. And they're now just waiting for approval for that product. But it's at times like this, when you're under pressure, you really see innovation at its best. Now, of course, the question for a number of you who are involved in sales roles is, how do I manage a sales force under these circumstances? Should I be selling? How should I be selling? These are key questions. And as I was informed earlier today, the chief executive of Iceland, the frozen food company, said, if you try to sell to me right now, I'm going to blacklist you right away. You want to help? Drive one of my delivery vans. So part of what we are going to be talking about this morning is how to manage a sales force remotely. To help us in this discussion, and this is an opportunity for you to listen first and then contribute second, I'm going to invite Simon Wheeldon, who you can see here on the screen, who's the co-founder and chief customer officer for CloudApps, to talk to us briefly about managing a sales force remotely with use of data. Simon, would you please introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you very much, Rob. So appreciate everyone's time today, particularly in these rather different circumstances. As Rob said, I'm the co-founder of an organisation called CloudApps, and we focus on driving sales behaviours to generate higher revenues for organisations. We've actually been working from home as a business probably for the last 10 years, so we're actually quite used to it, 2 to 3 days a week. Obviously, that's a change, ramping that up to sort of 5 days. In the last week, or last couple of weeks actually, we're actually finding that we're working even closer with our customers, and it's probably been, I don't know if you've been experiencing it as well, but it's actually been a very, very busy time as we try and help our customers and support them. Because this shift has been incredibly sudden, and what we again, talking to our customers, what we found is that some of these individuals are very excited to start with about working from home. They think it's going to open up all sorts of new opportunities for them, etc. But by kind of day 2, day 3, they're kind of talking to their managers. They're getting quite anxious, getting quite lonely, and in some cases getting a little bit bored because of the lack of sort of interaction and things. So we want to try and help as much as we can. Like any other organisation at this time, we want to support as many businesses as we can through this, both at an individual level, but also at a managerial level. So we're kind of seeing a little bit of a shift here in the way that organisations are sort of measuring success of their remote fields employees. And the kind of shift that we're seeing is that we're seeing this sort of, it's a kind of an accelerated shift from managing the sort of lagging indicator, which is a typical lagging indicator of one revenue. And we're seeing that shift to leading KPIs. So that's the biggest thing that we're seeing, and we're seeing that being accelerated. It was already happening, but we're seeing that being accelerated. So this kind of new leading KPI approach is where they're focusing on things like, the opportunity, the number of opportunities they've got coming into their pipeline, the size of those opportunities, the win rates, the time to close. And then at the moment, a lot of them are bringing in new KPIs around things like customer success and customer loyalty and things like this as well. Now, interestingly, there's a kind of a layer below this that we're seeing as well. So a lot of the sort of really forward-thinking or sales organizations, a number of which we're working with, are actually looking at how they can understand and drive the sales behaviors, which then lead to these leading indicators and then lead to the lagging indicator as a whole. And these behaviors are things that they can actually do, whereas obviously a KPI is something that you measure. So, how can we measure what they do? How can we understand what they do? And how can we encourage them to do more of the right things? And this is, you'll see this in sport today, where data, for example, is being brought into that whole sort of performance area. And the more data they can understand and gain insight from, the higher the performance they can get out of the individuals. And so these types of behaviors are things like, again, are they putting in customer calls to say, how can we help? So this is a shift in behavior that you want to be able to, to instill at this point. But then maybe some of the classic behaviors like, are you following up on your leads within 2 hours? Are you meeting decision makers? Are you researching competitors? These types of things. So with this sort of shift in focus from these sort of lagging KPIs to these leading KPIs, and then obviously ultimately to the behavior ones, we're seeing this being accelerated now, and in particular we're seeing accelerated because your sales teams will be, I imagine, unless you're working for somebody like Zoom or something like that, that you're probably seeing the lagging KPI lagging in the sense that it's going down, and as a result, we need to be able to focus on these leading KPIs and these behavior KPIs. And as I'll talk a little bit later as well, this is a change in mentality for the salespeople themselves to redefine what success is in their new world that they're going to be working in.
So Simon, your platform basically takes data out of Salesforce and analyzes good and bad behaviors, and then tries to direct people towards applying these good behaviors. But I guess a key question then is, how do you make sure you've got good data in your Salesforce implementation in order to derive the right insights and actions from it?
Yeah, so we're helping those organisations sort of maximise their investments in the technology. In our case, it's the CRM technology from Salesforce themselves. Clearly, there are other types of solutions out there that are helping in this scenario as well. People like Microsoft Teams and Slack and Google Hangouts and Zoom that we all hear about. But our focus is really around this shift in behaviours and how we can help these organisations. And I think everybody's working pretty flat out. I've even had my son works for Oxford University. In the last 2 weeks, he's been trying to get all the Oxford University professors and employees all onto their to be able to work remotely and using technology to do that. He's working from home, kind of about 10 yards away from me here. And they're getting in kind of 600 support tickets a day to try and help manage, etc. So everyone's working hard to do this. So from our perspective, kind of what our bit is that we want to help motivate the individuals. Our technology is going to help our customers motivate these individuals that are now working remotely. Again, going back to my point a little bit earlier about them being a little bit more sort of lonely and anxious, etc. They need a high level of communication. And so what we're able to do, and we've had some great customers that we work with. So Adecco is a good example. Obviously, they're trying to ramp up a lot of their temporary staff, but their permanent staff is that part of the business is taking a little bit of hit, as you can imagine. But from the temporary side, that then they're running daily competitions with their remote staff. They're all out of their branches and into their homes, and so now they're able to communicate with them, get them to use Salesforce, get them to be able to perform the right behaviours, and they're wrapping competitions around those behaviours, which should then lead to the right leading and lagging indicators. Vodafone are doing the same that we're working with. They've got about 350 digital sales team working out in Ireland. They normally have a really good sort of communal environment that's there, where they're all kind of bouncing off each other, young type environment of salespeople. And now they're all sitting in their home offices. And so again, we're running these sort of daily and weekly competitions with them to help drive their use of Salesforce. Another example is with a company that we work with, Aviva Investments, which they're actually shifting some of their KPIs. So they've actually taken a sort of quite executive approach to say, right, we're actually going to communicate a change in these KPIs, and we're going to actually have the technology that's going to show them what these new KPI results are on a real-time basis, so people can see how successful. And then another example, we've got Reed kicking off a competition today, again with their, with one of their teams as well. So they're all kind of ramping up, trying to motivate all these individuals and get them to be, driving this sort of shift in behaviours that we're seeing.
So with remote working, how do you monitor what's actually being done by your remote workers? This has always been a concern against people being allowed to work from home in the past.
Yeah, so I think there's obviously a balance. There's a level of trust that's required there as well. But as a managerial team, if they're not delivering on that lagging indicator that we talked about a bit earlier, you naturally fall back onto trying to understand what they're doing as individuals, what behaviours they're doing, what's the cadence of those behaviours, etc. And so you can use technology, and ours is a great example of that. Is where not only can we motivate the individuals, but we can also gain an insight into what behaviours they're doing, when they're doing those behaviours, and then we can use that in an effective way to help them. So we can, obviously the ones that are doing the right behaviours, that's great, and we can encourage and motivate those. But also we need to be very, very cognizant of the fact that some people will find it very difficult working in a remote environment. It'll be a little bit alien to them. So how do we understand which ones, where their behaviours are dropping and they're changing their behaviours in the wrong way, and how do we then go about coaching those individuals to perform back at the right level and compare them?
So any time is a good time to try out something new. But again, in this sort of work from home world, how do you determine whether some new initiatives you want to try on the sales management or the sales front have been successful or not?
Yeah, so again, as you quite rightly said, people are being incredibly creative at this point. They're trying to come up with all sorts of new ways they can adapt their products to meet the sort of changing world that we're in. They're trying to adapt their services. They're trying to come up with new packages, offerings, etc., to assist in this environment. But obviously those need to be tested. They need to be they need to be refined, etc. So they need to go through the innovation cycle, albeit very quickly. And so you need tools and technologies in place to understand that if you shift the behavior of the sales team in this particular way, does that have the effect that you want, the consequence that you want? So again, there's technologies, as I mentioned, is one of those where we're obviously observing what these behaviours are, and that information can then be used by the sales teams to work out whether these new innovations that you're putting in place, so whether it's a new training program, whether it's a new product or service that you're putting out, is that idea a good idea? Let's test it, and then let's refine that. Let's keep the good ideas, and let's weed out the ones that are not delivering.
And lastly, as part of this initial conversation with yourself, with potentially fewer resources available to you, they're not all healthy, hopefully everyone is from this call right now, and with deals being deferred and companies not sure about what they'd be doing right now, how do you make sure you focus the resources you've got on the deals that are most likely to be beneficial?
Yeah, so I mean, if you're running a CRM system, then you'll have a huge wealth of knowledge that's sitting inside that CRM system, and if you are able to use some of the modern AI, in particular things like deep learning, on that information, then you'll be able to do that across hundreds of bits of information around the opportunity, the accounts, and the details that are happening, and you'll be able to find patterns that no human brain could ever cope with. I mean, you might be able to find a pattern in 2 or 3 things in your head, but across hundreds of things you would be able to do. And so, we would recommend you look to technologies like AI to help with that, and try and find out, which of the deals, albeit in the old world, we appreciate that, which of the deals that led to success in the past, and then focus your valuable resources against those. And the other interesting thing is that AI will learn these new patterns that will be taking place even now a lot faster than the human will. So the human will be trying to work out what's going on, and if you were able to point AI at that information, you'll be able to find out what those patterns are a lot quicker than you would if you were trying to do it manually. So I guess my kind of overall advice, if I was to sort of summarize it down into 3 points that we're kind of seeing with some of the customers we're working with, is this point about managing by these leading KPIs and behaviors, not by those lagging KPIs, which aren't going to be as successful. Look to motivate your team, because their measure of success is typically that lagging KPI. How much have I closed? And you need now to educate them and help them shift their feeling of success and worth back to to these leading and behavioural KPIs that you're putting in place. And the final thing I just say, make it fun. They're all sitting at home, they're all struggling, they're all humans. I love the fact that we've got our videos on here. We've got our home offices. There's lots of people with different hobbies and things you can see in the background, and these sort of things going on. So bring out that character individual. Leverage that and try and add a bit of fun to what is as we all know quite tough times. So yeah.
Thank you, Simon, for that. Now, here's an opportunity for everyone else on the call to do one of two things. Either fire some questions at Simon or to offer your own views and experiences around managing a Salesforce remotely. If you can just wave at me, for those of you who've got your cameras on, I'll then invite you to switch your microphone on so you can then ask a question of Simon. So wave away, or not. David, please. Switch your microphone on and far away.
Yeah, cheers. Simon, just a question on those competitions you mentioned a few times. Could you give a bit more detail about, or give a more concrete example of what they were and how they motivated the staff? Because I was just curious whether or not they were purely around the KPIs or if they were something a bit more fun.
So they're usually a combination. So we would typically always put a behavior in aligned to some KPI. So we typically, in our particular case, when we're working with a customer, we will draw a map out. So we'll have the lagging KPI at the front of the map, we'll have the leading KPI next, and then we'll have the behaviors next, and it's sort of hierarchical. It's not quite a one-to-one match, but it's pretty close. So we know that the behavior we're driving should have an impact on the leading KPI and then should have an impact on the lagging KPI. So it's there for a purpose. As I say, in our particular case, we might put 40 or 50 of these into a customer's environment, but we would only ever probably pick between 5 and 7 to put into a competition at maximum, because if you try and drive too many all at the same time, then you lose control over being able to actually shift the direction of those individuals, the behavior of those individuals. Because if you swap one out and you've got 30 of them and you swap a different one in, it has no effect. Yeah. Whereas you've got 5 of them and you do that, then you can actually control it. You can up the points on one, and you can really steer the behavior of the sales team in that way. So yes, they tend to be aligned. You can put fun ones in there as well, but also you can be very agile with them as well. So we're finding that they're starting to put in new behaviors that they never did before. So a good example I gave a little bit earlier was around putting in a call to a customer, can I help call, basically, into a customer. And now they're driving the sales team to actually put those calls in, rather than, do you want to buy anything else? We're really struggling, to how can we help you? Can we, not only we've got this product or this service, but maybe we could finance it differently for you. Perhaps we could look at splitting the invoice over a period of time, or whatever it might be, or delayed payments, etc. So yeah, so a combination. Yeah, thank you.
And that's a good point, Simon. And I'll call you in a second, Martin. Right now, to me, selling should be more about relationship and empathy than outright sales. That's what's going to basically get you the respect that you deserve and from your customers. So Martin, sales leader, please.
Yeah, a couple of things. So I run the EMEA business for Proofpoint, cybersecurity company, and I've been there about a year. And actually, Simon, it's great to hear everything you've said, because I wholeheartedly back it. And in what was up until about 3 weeks ago normal business, we've been measuring activity, customer engagement, all of those things that you've been talking about. So probably not as effectively as we might with your platform, but certainly all those principles have been put in place. A couple of comments. One is, Rob, I really like what you've just said. We've actually shifted our mindset from always be closing to always be helping, and have been proactively reaching out to customers to say exactly that. How can we help? We had one project, a large customer that's on the critical path for them to go live and get their cybersecurity up to scratch, and suddenly 3 of their team are gone down with COVID-19. And so we've gone back and said, well, obviously there's a lot that we probably can't do because it's behind your firewall, but actually, if we can help in any shape or form, let us know. So I think that philosophy is great. But one of the things we're looking at, I'm just sharing this with the group, is we've been measuring activity, and in particular measuring the key activity is face-to-face meetings. That's sort of been the key thing that we've wanted to see as the leading indicator. We're now looking at whether actually, as our first-line sales managers are talking to their teams and encouraging and coaching them, whether we need to be looking at much more basic measures, such as, okay, how many customers have you just spoken to on the phone today? How many emails have you sent? What's been the shape and content of that email? And I'm wondering if given sort of the new normal, whether you've seen any shift in the measures that you've put in, that you'd recommend people putting in place, those leading indicators.
So we've seen a shift in the type of behavior. So because what we tend to do is we tend to build these things, we call them behaviors, believe it or not, we call them behaviors in our application, and they're defined by a set of criteria, etc. And they're business behaviors. So they are things like, have you followed up a lead within a certain time frame and this type of thing. So it's not just a simple, have you done this, have you done that, etc. It's normally got some business context wrapped around it.
Yeah.
So we've seen a shift in the style of those those behaviors, and we've also seen a shift in the sort of fun element of the competition, I suppose is a good way of describing it. So rather than it being a bit more serious, which it was before, because they're all working from home now, they're actually bringing in different themes into the competition, and Superman themes and this type of stuff to try and do all that sort of stuff. To go back to your question a little bit earlier around the sorts of types of behaviours, there's a maturity. We probably haven't got time to go on about today, but there's a maturity path basically that we see in the types of behaviours. So it starts with very technical behaviours like have they logged in, right, as a first piece, and then they kind of move through these sort of layers of maturity where you then start saying, well, are they actually doing anything once they've logged in? And then it moves on to are they actually doing anything of value when they're logged in? And then are they doing the right cadence of those types of things? And so it builds up over time. But you're right. Occasionally, you just have to go back to basics as well, and just drive some simple, clear behaviours that they need to do. Yeah.
And one of the back to basics is using this thing, not the keyboard of this thing, but the microphone. Because rather surprisingly, at least for me, some people are now reporting they're getting even more emails that they're working from home now, not less.
Yeah.
And for those of us who've been trying to sell, getting someone's attention has been quite a challenge with all the email flooding. But guess what? People right now would quite like if you give them a buzz and talk to them. It breaks up the monotony. So a basic sales technique is use the phone for what it was originally designed for, phoning.
I think that's a great point, Rob.
Claire, you have a question or comment?
A comment, really. I was just going to add to that sort of, as a consumer at the moment, I'm getting a message from every single business I've ever interacted with. And so I guess I had a question around prioritization, right? I may have had a nice meal in a restaurant once, but that doesn't mean I need to know your COVID planning right now. So I guess one question is, how do you make sure you're kind of reaching out to the people with the right level of priority? Because I think it is really easy to generate. I got a mail this morning from Intel, right, about their planning, and great, but it's easy to become overwhelmed, I think, by the number of boilerplate mails coming in. So definitely when something comes in that is addressed to you and your concerns, I think that makes a huge difference. And you're right that the telephone is a little bit easier right now than the wall of emails.
Simon, anything to offer to that, or anyone else for that matter?
I'll let somebody else respond to that if that's, yeah. Anybody else got a comment on that?
I'm just glad I've absolutely separated my business and personal emails, because the phenomenon you've described to me is mostly hitting in my personal email account. But I'm getting less of that on my business email account. But as I said, and actually the reason we're calling these virtual coffee breaks is that most of how we work is by sitting down, having a real coffee with somebody and just finding out what's going on in the world. Now, we can't do that, but there are ways you can adjust for these things. But yes, if I see another email from someone advising me on their COVID-19 treatment, I'll maybe adjust my junk folder
Yeah.
setting.
I guess to be fair to those businesses, though, if they didn't do that, it might be considered remiss of them from a corporate governance point of view, and also perhaps it does resonate if you're a particularly frequent user of a given restaurant or whatever, then perhaps it does resonate. But I do take the point. I think the thing we've noticed from customers, and we're again obviously in the B2B world, the thing we've noticed from customers is the feedback either directly or on LinkedIn, that those companies that are saying, you're in crisis now with COVID-19, so buy more of my software, that behavior is going to get remembered. When we do return to whatever the new normal is. And so, Rob, to your point, how people behave now is really going to determine their future success, I think.
And Andrew had a comment, and I guess many of us will not be drinking Wetherspoons when they reopen. Andrew.
It's a great point.
In response, Claire, to your question, I was going to echo what Simon said at the start, which is, I think this is a mindset thing. If you ask yourself, how can I be of service, rather than how can I get paid to serve, that's a good mindset. So if you're going to send a message out to a customer to engage in this time, just be genuine about it and ask that question, how can I help? I agree, getting boilerplate messages saying here's our COVID-19 strategy, that just no. But
yeah,
if it comes from the right place, then it should be welcome.
Yeah, and Claire, we've taken a slightly different approach. We've not written a formal 16-page long COVID response. We've just put a very short email together, direct to our customers. And in fact, and we've also gone to our prospects offering a free work from home kit. So basically, they're able to use our software for 3 months, free of charge. If they've got teams over 25 users, obviously you're all welcome to take that up if you want to as well. We've just made that available. So if you want to motivate your staff and have our software to help you do that, then we'd be delighted to help you through this troubled times. So we just want to help as best we can.
I think that's a great approach, because now's the time when people are really open to experimenting and trying things that might otherwise feel really different. But actually, given that everything is different right now, why not try it?
Yeah, and then measure to see whether it works. And if it does, great, do more. If not, then fine. So yeah.
So the reason we timed these for 30 minutes was with no heating on our buildings, if you're trying to keep your spending down, and 30 minutes being as long as you can then survive without a hot coffee. We've got 3 minutes left before I plan to close this call. So any further sort of questions or comments or observations? I mean, we're all in this boat, right? So at times like this, it really does encourage us all to forget the fact that we might be working with competing firms and just put our combined, brains to this challenging task. There has not been a period like this in mankind's, humankind's history, and so we are really up against it, trying to figure these things through. So even if it doesn't happen on this call now, share your ideas, share your thoughts, share your questions about, how to keep going. So any final questions or comments?
I do like Martin's always be helping methodology. It does stand for ABH, by the way, which I had a little chuckle at myself.
If there's no more comments or questions, can I thank Simon for sharing some of his thoughts on the subject, and I thank you all for contributing your thoughts and your time. Stay safe, and I'll add my own addition to that, and sane.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Thanks for setting it up. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.